the recording. Yep. It gave a ping. And the recording will be shared on our blog post, which is at DiSSCo.tech. So you can, if you've seen something interesting and you want to share with your colleagues, you can show that part or only specific pieces out of it. Yeah. So DiSSCo is a platform. I've shown this image quite a couple times, but just to recap, we have on the left side, we have data providers. And on the right side, we have data consumers. And in the middle, we see this DiSSCo infrastructure. And within the DiSSCo infrastructure, we will have human agents working on the data, curating the data, improving the quality, creating links to other resources, and we'll leverage machine agents, as we call them, this more simple rule-based tools to work on data enhancement and data quality as well. And what we're working on is this DiSSCo core infrastructure. This means collecting and harmonizing the data into the open digital specimen or data format. We'll mint the PIDs and digital identifiers. Make sure it's versioned and provenance is there, that people can start annotating data either through the human route or the machine route. Extend data, link it to other resources. Think about DNA data with the ENA or barcode data with BOLD. And we'll make sure that data is exposed, which will be a topic for this demo as well. And this part is in what we do. We do the DiSSCo core infrastructure, which I will show, and we focus on DiSSCover, which will be your main human-facing interface. And we demonstrate a couple of the machine annotation services. So a couple of smaller of these machine annotation services we'll demonstrate as well. So what's new? First, I want to do a big thank you to Tom Dijkema. It's been a while since we had the last demo. Tom Dijkema left the team, and I got ill. I was out for a couple of months due to back issues, so we only had Sue guarding the fort and making sure that DiSSCover was still up and running in DiSSCo infrastructure. But luckily, since that time, I would say around May, we had a couple new team members, which is Melanie De Leeuw and Mathilde Lescan. Melanie is front-end developer, so she's replacing Tom. Mathilde is an information analyst, and she's helping us making the connection to users and organizing and structuring the work that we're doing. And we recently had Martijn de Visser join us, who's a UI UX expert, who's helping us on how we need to present things to the user. We have a lot of information, but we're still struggling a bit on how to present this in an attractive way to users. So really happy that we got them back. I got better, so I'm back as well. So we have a full team again. So we want to, we're making progress that we want to keep you informed about. So what we did, we deployed a minimal viable product, and that was one of the results of the DiSSCo transition project. And this MVP, we've slowly and steadily risen now to 5 million DOIs. And what does 5 million DOIs look like? I want to switch to a DataSite interface. So we're minting these DOIs with DataSite. There we have our repository, and you'll see here that we're almost reaching 6 million DOIs now. These are all resolvable DOIs that you can find either in DataSite or use the DOI to, let's pick one, to use in publications. And this DOI will point to the digital specimen in our DiSSCo infrastructure. And of those almost 6 million, we have about 70% are specimen DOIs and 30% are image DOIs. So that's a bit the difference. And yeah, so I have an example here, which, well, we resolved the DOI, but just to show that there's also information in the actual record, we can also say, well, we want the same specimen, but then only see the metadata of the identifier. so the DOI record, and you'll see here that we have all this information in the actual DOI record. And this one then points as a primary location to a DiSSCover. As a secondary location, it will point to the API. So this information is also in here. So this is the API, the same specimen. And as third, we'll point to the, if it's available, to the resolvable URL of the institution itself. So all this information is available in the identifier itself. So even if by some route DiSSCo won't actually happen, or all of DiSSCo would disappear, all this information will still be safeguarded through the DOI Foundation, and there's a guarantee that this information will be there for practically all eternity. And also this bit of basic meta information, but what's the specimen host, what's the host name, what's the primary identifier, who issued the PID, so that's all traceable. So we're quite happy. I've had talks with DataSite yesterday, and the goal is to continue minting DOIs, ingesting data in our production environment, and we'll hopefully reach somewhere around to 20 million this year, which actually, will be one of the biggest players in the DOI space. So quite a big milestone, and we're really happy that this looks all stable. It works well. Let's see the next slide. It's actually, we had a couple of teething issues, teething problems, but we fixed most of those. So one of the bigger issues was that we had, for some reason, had an assumption that there would be a one-to-many relationship between a specimen and the media. So one specimen could have multiple pictures taken of it, but we didn't realize how many specimens there would actually be where there is one image and there are multiple specimens on the image. And we needed some fix for it. Sue worked quite hard to fix this issue, and I got an example here where it isn't completely clear, but on this image there are actually 3 specimens, and they all have unique identifiers. And probably if I go here, you will see here that we have, this is the relationship diagram that we have, and you'll see that we have this digital specimen, which points to this image. This one points to the same image, but it's a different specimen with a different physical specimen identifier. And we had a third one here, 1, 2, 3, which is this one. So we now are able to support the use case where there's one image and there are actually 3 specimens on this image. You'll still see the path here, and you can still go from each of these specimens. You can go to the image, and from the image you can go to each of the 3 specimens. So we have now kind of safeguarded that relationship, and that was one of the issues that we encountered when we went to production. We also switched a bit of the informatics behind it on our event infrastructure, where we have the kind of tool called Kafka, which we replaced with RabbitMQ. It gives us more control to see how the information flows through our system, and where potential bottlenecks could occur. So that's a bit of the technical part. And we are continuously adding observability on the production environment. So if anything happens, if there are any issues, then we get an alert. We also created this dashboard, which shows the uptime. So I think this was last month. So we can continuously monitor if our DOIs are resolvable, if our APIs are working. And in this case, this month, everything was completely green. But yeah, we can quickly see when there's alerts. There are a couple smaller data issues that we fixed, and there are a couple of data quality issues which we recognize and which we discussed with relevant institutions. There were a couple issues where we saw that too many media items were created, duplicate media items. So we reached out to the relevant institution. They fixed the quality issue, and both in DiSSCo as well as in GBIF, this issue was fixed. We also saw for the first time that suddenly from specific data sets, information disappeared, which was no longer available in DiSSCo, but also not in GBIF or any other data consumer. We reached out, and because we have specific provenance on when a specimen changed, so within DiSSCo, the removal of this information created a new version, and we could exactly see when this new version was created. We could say to the institution, well, we recognize that around this time, something happened in your system that removed this important piece of information. So they were, they could look at what happened at a specific moment and fix the issues in their systems. So there were already a couple moments that we could actually help our data providers with solving any data quality issues they had. So we were quite happy with that part. And this is where I give the floor to Melanie. She will show a bit in the next video the progress that we're making with the first user group, which is giving us feedback, a group at Naturalis, because they're close by, and we picked a pilot project, which is the Naturalis Papillote project, which is about Southeast Asian butterflies. I won't go into detail, but we are identifying use cases, and especially the taxonomic annotation has gotten priority. So one of the use cases here to invite taxonomic experts to make taxonomic annotations on a specific specimen in the DiSSCo infrastructure. Okay. Melanie, you ready?
Yeah, I am. You can go to the next slide, and you'll see here what the old situation was in DiSSCover. Of course, we went from an MVP, and now we're trying to make it as user-friendly, and together with our user group, we get requirements. So basically what we do is we search for a digital specimen. This is still the same, but how to annotate is by clicking on the annotation button, and then of course start your annotation, go through several options here. And while this mostly shows all the, how would I say it, functionality that DiSSCover actually has, and for that purpose, this was actually great, but pieces of feedback included, it's a bit overwhelming. I don't know what every field is. Is every field, does it need to be annotatable? That wasn't a correct English word, but does it need an annotation or not? Stuff like that. So,
ready for the next? Yeah.
Yeah. We went from this to what you see here right now. And of course, the flow is still the same. So I'm just looking for a very specific digital specimen, and we used the Lepidoptera because that's how we were demoing it. And right now, instead of clicking on the annotate button, we're clicking on a very tiny icon there that just allows you as a user to annotate the accepted identification for now. We're doing it in tiny steps, of course. You've immediately selected the correct class, and you can only see a few fields that we would like you to be able to annotate on. Here was scientific name. We've added the thesaurus. That's correct. That's an API call basically to catalog of life, in which you can actually just enter a few characters. You get a list of selections, or at least a drop down with selections, and you select something, and every level above is automatically filled in according to the taxonomic standards from this specific data set. It's not perfect by any means, it's not at all, but these were the first few steps that we've taken to make it a bit easier, to make it a bit more user-friendly for researchers to actually do what they want to do, and also to make it a bit less to limit the human errors here as well, and spelling mistakes and stuff like that. for what's next. I think we are now sort of perfecting and actually going to annotate at least a few specimens with our users. And next, we're also gonna work on the georeferencing to implement some sort of same flow here to make it a bit less big and overwhelming, but just, you know, only the fields that users actually need to annotate. I think that for now is it.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, now, yeah, we have this huge array of possibilities, but now I want to tailor it at the user and only request the information that we actually need from the user and automatically fill in the rest. Yeah.
Maybe a last note there is, of course, we started with just one small specific group of users, and this is all also been done. You know, for now, this is what we need, but we can more easily build upon things and remove it if we don't need it for now. Then do it the other way around and keep everything as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Then. Another topic that we've been working on is download. So in the big picture of DiSSCo as a platform, we've seen the data consumers on the right side, but how can they collect the data? And of course, one of the main data formats that we export our biodiversity data in are the Darwin Core archives. So we wanted to create an option to select a group of specimen or a complete data set and export this as a Darwin Core archive. Which means that we had to do a couple tricks along the way, but we've now been able to, at least for each source system, so for each data that we provided, to say, well, you're also able to export this as a Darwin Core archive. And just to give an overview, I think these are actually the we go to the development environment. So we got a whole range of selection from Schenkenberg Institute in Frankfurt. Yeah. And so all the data is in, I think this one is in DiSSCover. It's got about 170,000 items. But I would actually like to download this information and possibly any changes that have been made in DiSSCo as a Darwin Core archive. And I can now have a link which we can follow, and it will hopefully say, where is it? Put it in here. It will now download it as a Darwin Core archive, which we have pre-created. So we have now an endpoint where you can say, download this is Darwin Core archive. And when I look into it, we'll see the regular, the EML, so the dataset metadata, which in this case, we just took over from the metadata that we got supplied. We have identifications, we have multipedia, and we have an occurrence file. And this all complies to the Darwin Core archives and can now be pushed anywhere for any data consumer to grab, and will contain all the information that we have in DiSSCo, including any changes made by users. So it doesn't include the annotations, but it would include any accepted identifications. However, on the other side, we know that there's Darwin Core archives are a bit limited in their occurrence-centric approach in the STAR model that they use. And we have been involved with the providing feedback for the new Darwin Core conceptual model. The new Darwin Core conceptual model, if you haven't looked at it, it's now in review, so it's in open review. So feel free to take a look at it. But it has a lot more classes and a lot more blocks, and provides us with a lot more possibilities to include all the information that we have. And I would say our open digital specimen is closely aligned with this new Darwin Core conceptual model. And that means that we can get almost seamless integration with how we exchange information to our data consumers and especially to GBIF once this has been implemented. DiSSCo is one of the early adopters because we want to see how it works together with our open digital specimen data model. And because we have the experience there on how to model specimen data, we were able to provide a lot of input into especially the material entity, event identification, locations. And I've spoken a couple of times with Tim Robertson and John Courage on making changes, and they're really open for any additional comments. So this is also a shout out for them to, if you have time, take a look at the model, and this is the chance to influence it. As part of that process, we also wanted to create an option where you can download a Darwin Core data package of a data set. So this is actually the same data set that we just saw from Schenkenberg, but then packaged as a Darwin Core data package. So you'll see that we have a couple more classes in here, that we have this data package JSON, which you can open, and you'll see the metadata, but also a description of what's in the files, and how the files are structured, which is behind this link. And now we have this Darwin Core data package where we have a lot more possibilities for putting in all the information that we have in our Open Digital Specimen Data Model. You can also find an example of how our Darwin Core data package in the official GitHub repository, where we are one of the examples for material specimen, and we provided GBIF and John with how we modeled it and how it looks like. So here's an example file where we have about 300 specimen in here. And this has been checked by John as well, if it complies to the new standards. On this topic, we'll also give a presentation during the Living Data Conference, where we'll also present our work a bit more in depth on the challenges we had there and how we overcame those challenges. So if you are there, or if you are joining virtually, there's more. We will present more information on these on the generation of these Darwin Core data packages there. And one last topic that I would like to show involves a machine annotation service that we really like. It's called VoucherVision, and it came a bit out of the AI for Labels project, which was the SES project that DiSSCo was involved in, where we developed Splat, an automatic label transcription tool. And when doing that and working on an inventarization of OCR tools within Naturalis, we came across this tool, which has been developed by William Weaver at University of Michigan, and he's written a nice publication about it as well, which you can find here. And it's a bit slow, but yeah, there we go. And it's about specimen label transcription, and it leverages large language models, which by now we all know a bit about ChatGPT and how large language models work. And he had a demo website where we were wondering if we could test or integrate VoucherVision with DiSSCo and use his API for testing purposes. So we built a small machine annotation services, and now this VoucherVision, this label transcription tool, is available in the Sandbox environment for any specimen there. So if we go to Sandbox, this is a machine annotation service that you run on a media item. So if I say, well, I want only specimen with media, this actually looks like a nice label that would be fit for transcription. Of course, I need to sign in. Yep. Okay. There we go. And I can say annotate. I will select schedule VoucherVision and say run it. And now in the background, it might take a moment because I think both VoucherVision and our infrastructure scale based on needs. Oh, it's already completed. That's quite fast. Let's see. If we now go to the specimen and I say annotate, we can now see that VoucherVision created annotations, a couple on the identification, which are not always as useful as we would like, but it did recognize an identification by bunkers, and it recognized Nijmegen as county, which is fair. That's good. So we're still working on checking how the quality is, and it differs. But the idea is that you could easily reject and accept those annotations. I actually had an example here. Yeah, here. Let's see, I didn't put it in as a link. Where it actually took coordinates from the label as well. So here you see that, there are no coordinates and there's a bit of information missing but those coordinates are actually on the label. So you would imagine that the digital version would also have those coordinates, and VoucherVision recognized those coordinates. It also made a suggestion for the event date, for the verbatim date, for the locality, for the agent, for the identification, which is probably the collector. So we see here for the province and the longitude. So it's a first step to see if we can automatically transcribe these labels, and we know there's improvements, but it does look promising on what it's able to deliver. There's some further work to be done. VoucherVision uses custom prompts, so you can write your own prompt to map your data and give it some specifics on where it can find specific information, some instructions, some hints, and we now have a couple ideas on at least starting with writing our own custom DiSSCo prompt, which so we can more easily map the information and probably extract more information out of it. And what would even be nice, we already chatted a bit with William Weaver about it, to see if we can make dynamic prompts. And we'll start testing that further, because we believe that this could be a first step to automatically start transcribing at least the basic information from a label. So for more detailed information, we'll probably need users, but at least to get the first step of the digitization of the label information. And that were about the things I wanted to demo. Then we want to have a look forward. So I already mentioned that we'll continue the data ingestion. We'll move to 20 million DOIs. And if you're interested in having your DOIs, your data sets in the DiSSCo production environment, we are open we're still looking at which data sets we're going to select to reach those 20 millions. So yeah, we're still reach out to us if you think there is a good and valid reason that your data set should get priority, and we'll be open to it. As Melanie said, we are going to make further improvements to the annotation flow, and we're going to start with first experts. Collection managers and experts are going to test how the taxonomic flow works, and then how we can learn from the developments of the taxonomic flow to also improve, as Melanie mentioned, the georeferencing flow and possibly additional flows through DiSSCover. Sue has been working on the machine annotation services, on scheduling those on ingestion. So say if I start the ingestion of a new data set, I want to check for each specimen, I want to check if there is a record in ENA, so that we can directly make that link. And it could also be that we say, well, for this specific data set, we want to run VoucherVision because we only have a physical specimen identifying an image, and we just want VoucherVision to fill in most of the rest of that information if possible. So we want to run those machine annotation services not by manually selecting it, but directly run those when data is being ingested. And we also made a start already on virtual collections. This is a Tetris deliverable within the Tetris European project, where you can select a group of specimens and say, well, these are now part of a reference collection, and I can easily find those by selecting this virtual collection. So kind of grouping specimens together because they have a specific function, and specifically put a public virtual collection of it, because these virtual collections will be public. We envision that somewhere in the future you might get your own private virtual collections where you have your own private groups, but these virtual collections that we're now creating will be public for everybody. Yeah, and so the Darwin Core archives and Darwin Core data packets are now only available for the source systems. That's partly because we're still looking on how we need to model our dataset metadata. Because if we're gonna create a Darwin Core archives for any cross section that we have, we need to fill in some additional information about the dataset metadata, because it's no longer just one dataset. There could be different licenses in there, and it's coming from different institutions. So we need some way to indicate that, and make sure that every institution is recognized and attributed in the metadata. So we're still working on that part. We'll hopefully within the next couple of months we'll have it ready. And then a big chunk of work is done by Mathilde and by Martijn on refining the annotation evaluation flow. So how can I easily approve or disapprove an annotation? Because we want to go to basically the first step where we can update specimen information through those annotations that the expert create on the front end within DiSSCover. And that's quite a tricky part, because then we're actually going to update the authoritative information. So a lot of brain power is going into this topic on how we can make this right. Yeah. Image storage in DiSSCo, a lot of institutions are struggling at this moment by bots going through their endpoints to their image servers. We had quite a couple of issues here at Naturalis as well. If DiSSCo is able to store image or image derivatives, then we don't have to make calls to the original image server hosted by the institution, and we would be more decoupled from those image servers, and we wouldn't put additional load on those. So we're looking into options to store at least part of those images at DiSSCo. An additional benefit would be that for a specific data set, you could say, give me all the images, which is a request we get quite often from AI developers and machine learning developers who are working on those images and just would like a kind of downscaled version of that. So we envision we get an export product where you can, which basically contains just a selection of images from different DiSSCo specimens. And we're supporting further integration with ELViS. So we just had talks with ELViS and the people at the Museum Naturel Histoire in Paris with Maxime. And they got a couple of additional requirements to further integrate ELViS with the DiSSCo platform. And a completely backend change, which you might notice at some point will be switching from identity and access management system. One of our partners there will no longer maintain what we currently have running, so we'll take it over. Maybe the login screen will look a little bit different than you're used to at some point. Yeah, but functionality will still be the same there. And I promised a lot of people that we'll keep it short so that there would be room for discussion, which the previous session has been missed. So this is where, we're asking for your feedback. These are a couple of suggestions or questions that I had, but feel open to comment on anything that we mentioned. Do you see any issue in how we're doing, for example, the taxonomic annotations?
So can I chime in then?
Yeah, of course, Jim. Yeah.
Thanks very much for the presentation, both of you. Very cool stuff. So if you're asking, so just specifically on taxonomic annotations, what I'm interested in is what happens next. So then what about the second bird collection? What about GBIF? Once you get the annotation done, where does it go?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Yeah, so so if you get the annotation, then the annotation itself is basically just a piece of information attached to the specimen. So it's not an actual change yet in the specimen. And then we need some way to figure out who's allowed to accept your annotation so that it changes the authoritative data. So let's say for now, just for the sake of it, that the collection manager who's responsible for the collection can accept those annotations. So that then that annotation is accepted, and it will create a new version of the digital specimen with the new updated information that you provided as an expert. And then that information is still in DiSSCo, as you correctly say, and that's why we've built the DiSSCo archive export, so that we're setting up at this moment connections with GBIF. First to their testing environment to see if we can supply that information to GBIF. And then that route is, let's say, relatively easy because we're building on top of international standards, the DiSSCo archives and the DiSSCo data packages. So we'll expose it and somebody can collect that information. Providing that data back to the institution itself. So let's say Naturalis or Schenkenberg. That's a bit more tricky because each institution uses their own collection management systems. And at this moment, we have this on the roadmap for the start of next year. We already had some discussions with a couple of collection management systems providers, such as Specify and Earthscape. And we need to look at a smart way to get that information back into their systems as well. Or at least that they are able to make a selection, because they might not be interested in all information that we have, or might not be able to put in all information that we have in their system. But yeah, that's for this year probably we want to make the first step that you would be able to accept an annotation and update the specimen information in DiSSCo. And next year the priority will really be, okay, now we have this updated information. How do we get it out? How do we get it back to the original system and data aggregators as GBIF? Yeah.
Thanks.
Does anybody else see any low-hanging fruit? Yeah, Rick?
Just a question. So if annotations can change in time, so not only identification, but also like corrections in georeferences, will there be any kind of versioning so that people can go back to previous versions? And will those new versions get new DOIs, or how do you see this?
Question. Yeah, so versioning and provenance is really important within our role. So each change that we make will get a new version, but we'll also generate a provenance record saying what was the annotation, or what was the change that was made to the digital specimen. Let's keep it at the digital specimen. Who made that change and when was that change made? And then also who approved that annotation. So also, because we want to have that whole traceability back, and each will be a new version, and all the changes between the versions will also be stored. So yeah, we already have seen. That's actually one of the things I mentioned in the provenance, where we now say, well, that we accept the information from the source system as a kind of authoritative information, but where the source system provided us with new updated information, there we saw that we created a new version, and then said, well, this piece of information is now missing in this regard, because there was an issue with the production of the DiSSCo archive at that institution. So we could see and say, well, at this specific moment, your system supplied us with new information which no longer had these fields, and that generated a new version into DiSSCover saying version 2. Well, actually, we could see in version 1 there was more information. So each change should get in. So we're expecting quite a couple of versions at some point. It could be that we have version 40 or 50 of a specimen, because we at some point we made links to ENA and to GBIF, which created updates. We might have got a new information from the source system. The taxonomy changed because the export made a change, or maybe the catalog of life, the tree made a taxonomic tree made a change. So then we would also create an update and say, well, we updated this name because it's no longer the accepted name, for example. So we can see all those updates piling up on each other, and we expect that we will get a lot of version at some point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, this is really the moment to just bother us with any questions that you have. Yeah.
Just a quick reminder that the DOI won't change.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
The version, so the idea is that if you want to use the DOI in a publication, you will get to the latest version, but from there you can say, give me version 7 or version 5, whatever, so that capability is there.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Well, I'll just try to chime in with that one, because and maybe this was just growing pains, but with the one little pilot we did on those few spiders, we minted some DOIs for them in the publication. Those DOIs changed. So the ones in the publication are not the ones in DiSSCo, but they resolved. So
Yeah, correct. Yeah. No, we did the spiders before we had the actual production infrastructure ready. And what we did with the DOIs, the old DOIs, we redirected, or with the DOIs, you can kind of chain them as well and say, well, this DOI is no longer valid, but go to this DOI. And the information that's in the original DOI is still there. But now it points to the new DOI, which then points to DiSSCo. Yeah.
Okay, but you said an important thing. So, but because of the timing of that thing, so the difference now is that won't happen.
Yeah. Exactly.
For the provenance data, typically do the source systems also store provenance data, and according to what standards, and how would you look at syncing those or integrating that?
I don't think we will integrate those, because they're basically records of all the actions that happened in our system. And I don't think that most systems, but then I don't know all the collection management systems, but at least in this case, there was no provenance record of the change in the original system. And also in GBIF, GBIF also doesn't keep provenance records. So the only place where we could actually pinpoint when the change happened to the data was within DiSSCo. Yeah. And through DiSSCo, we could, pinpoint, say, well, at this specific date, we ingested new information from you, and there was information missing, which we did have previously. Okay. Yeah, if there are no longer any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any moment. So if in the next couple hours or days you suddenly think of something that you're interested in, just send us an email or reach out. Then I did want to mention, let's grab the presentation back. I did want to mention that DiSSCo will be present at the DOIs, the Living Data Conference, next month in Colombia. And we'll have a session on, these are all links, so I will share the presentation as well. The data model for global implementation of the Open Digital Specimen. So we'll have one specifically on the Open Digital Specimen or underlying data model. And I will go into depth in a session towards a common language, exploring the OpenDS data model. Sharif will look at building and serving fair terms and vocabularies for the Open Digital Specimen. And I want to mention that MITS, a data standard where DiSSCo is involved as well, which we already implemented in our production environment, is moving to a final stage as well, an acceptance into the network data standards. And there will also hold a session with what's the state of global digitization, MIDS as an institution and global digitization standard, which might also be of your interest. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be one of the early adopters of the examples in the Darwin Core Data Package, part 2, where we'll showcase the seamless integration between DiSSCo, Open Digital Specimen, and the Darwin Core Data Packages, and go more into depth on that. And yeah, we'll show additional DiSSCo showcases on the work that we're doing. So if you're there or if you're virtually, feel free to ask us anything at that moment as well. This is a slide with the additional resources. It said just if you want to refresh or you want to check up on our OpenDS terms pages, on the machine annotation documentation, which we wrote specifically for developers, or any of the deliverables in which we describe the architecture or how things work. These are the places to look for those knowledge. And with that, from the whole DiSSCo development team, I would like to thank you for your interest. I want to make this a regular thing again, with probably every 2 or 3 months. We'll do this one to update you on the latest development and what we're doing. And we're really hoping to see you next time.